Have you ever done something so ordinary, so seemingly innocent, that it ended up changing everything? Think back to your high school days. Remember that feeling when a teacher handed out a random project and you just wanted to get it over with? That's exactly where this story begins. But what happens next is anything but ordinary. In fact, it's unthinkable. A 17-year-old student from a quiet American suburb turns in a school assignment, hoping maybe for a B+, maybe for a little extra credit if they're lucky. Instead, within just a few weeks, that project ends up cracking open a cold case murder that's haunted an entire town for nearly 30 years. One forgotten file, one overlooked clue, and one determined teenager. What unfolds from this simple act will leave your jaw on the floor. Now listen, if you're watching this, it's not by accident. You're here because something about the story already has your mind racing. Maybe you're a parent wondering how something like this could have slipped through the cracks for decades. Maybe you're a true crime junkie who's seen every episode of Dateline and Unsolved Mysteries. Or maybe, just maybe, you've got your own theories about a crime that's still unsolved in your area. Whatever brought you here, let me promise you this. You are going to get the answer you came looking for. Not just facts and headlines, but the deeply human story behind it all. You'll walk away with a full picture, the chilling timeline, the people who were left behind, and how one teenager's curiosity forced an entire police department to reopen a case they had long forgotten. But here's the real reason you need to stay until the very end, because this isn't just about solving a murder. It's about how it got solved, who ignored it, and why. It's about how the most powerful breakthroughs often come from the most unexpected places. And trust me, there's a final twist in this story that even the lead detective didn't see coming. So before you scroll away or click to the next video, don't. Because every single minute of this story is a piece of a puzzle that finally fits together after 3 long decades. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever seen something that didn't quite sit right with you? Maybe it was a story in the news that never added up. Maybe it was something in your own life, something just a little off. That quiet itch in the back of your brain telling you, something's not right here. That's exactly what our main character felt, even if they didn't realize it at first. No cape, no badge, no forensic lab. Just a laptop, a school-issued tablet, and a burning sense that the truth was buried just deep enough that no one had cared to dig for it. Until now. Let me paint the scene for you. A small town in Ohio, the kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked and wave at each other on morning walks. It's the kind of town where everyone knows your business and your last name matters. But it's also the kind of town where secrets don't die, they just fade. 30 years ago, a young woman disappeared while walking home from a summer job at the local diner. Her case lit up the newspapers for a few months, search parties, tearful vigils, televised pleas. But then nothing. Leads dried up, witnesses moved away, and life, painfully and slowly, went on. The police called it a cold case. Her family called it torture. And the community? Well, they tried to forget, until one high school senior, in the year 2025, unknowingly lit a match in a room soaked with gasoline. Her name was Emily Hart. Quiet. Brilliant. The kind of student teachers remember because she asks the questions no one else thinks to ask. She had a soft spot for old records and classic documentaries. She volunteered at the library, tutored middle schoolers in math, and barely had 300 followers on social media. The last person you'd expect to blow open a murder mystery. When her history teacher assigned a local legends project, one of those filler assignments schools throw in to meet state standards, Emily didn't want to do the same old ghost story or quirky mayor tale. She wanted to dig deeper. She wanted truth. And what she found wasn't just a local legend. It was a local lie. She started with microfilm, yes, actual microfilm in the back of the county library. What she uncovered first were inconsistencies in the original police reports, a missing time log, a witness statement that had mysteriously vanished, and a suspect who was questioned once and never again. All things the public never knew. As the days went by, Emily couldn't let it go. She compiled documents, mapped timelines, flagged every odd detail. She created a digital presentation that connected dots the authorities never had, or maybe chose not to. And when she emailed it to the local news station, thinking maybe they'd feature it in a slow week segment, She had no idea the firestorm it would create. What happened next? The newsroom forwarded her work to a retired anchor who had covered the original case back in the 90s. He passed it to a friend in law enforcement. Then, within 48 hours, that file was in the hands of the Cold Case Division. Suddenly, doors that had been closed for decades were being pried open. Warrants were issued. DNA evidence long buried in archives was pulled out and retested using today's advanced tools. And before the school bell rang the following Monday, the name of the long-forgotten suspect was back on everyone's lips. But here's where things take an even darker turn, and this is where you'll want to lean in. Because as investigators reopened the case, they began uncovering details that went far beyond one missing girl. A pattern. Other disappearances. A cover-up. People in positions of power who had every reason to keep things buried. What started as a high school project quickly became a ticking time bomb for an entire community that thought its past was safely behind them. And now you're part of the story too. Because by watching, you're bearing witness to how truth finally clawed its way into the light. You're going to see the real footage, hear the voices of those who lived through it, and watch how one teen's project sent shockwaves through City Hall, the police department, and most importantly, the victim's family. You'll meet the girl who wouldn't stop digging, the detective who had nearly given up hope, the mother who never stopped setting a place at the table. You'll see how silence protected a predator, and how one ordinary student shattered that silence with nothing more than curiosity and courage. I need you to stay with me until the very last frame of this story. Not because I need the views, but because the people in this town, and especially the woman at the center of this case, deserve to have their truth told all the way through. You'll be shocked by how deep the conspiracy ran. You'll be stunned by who tried to stop the investigation. But most of all, you'll be inspired by what one voice can do when it refuses to be ignored. This story isn't just a mystery. It's a message. And that message is loud, clear, and powerful. Never underestimate the impact of asking the right question. So, let me ask you one now. What do you think Emily found in that original evidence file that changed everything? What detail did the police miss, or ignore, that finally brought justice home? Because when I tell you what it was, your heart is going to stop. We're about to peel back the layers. What lies beneath isn't just a crime, it's a betrayal. And the person responsible? They were a trusted name in town, someone no one dared to accuse until now. It all started about 2 months before the news broke, long before Emily Hart's name was trending alongside phrases like unsolved mystery cracked, cold case reopened, and high school student solves crime. Back then, she was just another face in a senior class trying to make it through the final stretch before graduation. She had a modest group of friends, mostly fellow bookworms and history buffs who hung out after school in the back corner of the library or the robotics lab. Her teachers knew her as the kind of student who never turned in an assignment late, but also never raised her hand unless she absolutely had to. She wasn't chasing clout on TikTok, and her Instagram was mostly filled with grainy pictures of her cat and an ever-growing shelf of vintage detective novels. She lived with her mom, a night shift nurse who worked overtime just to keep the lights on, and her younger brother Mason, who was obsessed with drone racing. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and, until recently, that had been enough. But there was something different about Emily lately, something her friends had started to notice. She wasn't as present during lunch breaks, often zoning out or scribbling notes in her binder with an intensity that didn't match the laid-back vibe of senior spring. She'd started asking strange questions about the town's past, about the police, about missing persons cases that had long since faded from public memory. At first, her friends thought she was just prepping for her project. But then she started skipping group hangouts to visit the town archives, requesting old documents and files that hadn't been touched in years. More than once, the librarian asked if she was doing a college thesis. "No," Emily would say, smiling politely. "Just something for class." But behind that calm response was a growing obsession, a quiet fire that refused to go out. What most people didn't know, even her closest friends, was that Emily had stumbled across the case by accident. She'd been browsing old microfilm reels for inspiration when she saw a black-and-white photo of a young woman whose eyes seemed to scream from the page. Her name was Teresa Lynn Porter, and the caption read simply, Last seen July 15, 1995, missing, presumed dead. The article was short. It mentioned that she was 21, worked at the Sunny Diner on Route 12, and had vanished while walking home just before dusk. The official police statement claimed no signs of struggle were found, no evidence of foul play. She might have run away, they said. Maybe she got mixed up with the wrong crowd. The case was closed quietly after just 6 months. But something about it gnawed at Emily. She couldn't stop thinking about the fear in Teresa's eyes. And when she looked deeper, the cracks in the story began to show. Her research led her to an old forum thread on a now-defunct local message board, where a user under the handle TruthSeeker1995 had posted years ago, claiming to have seen Teresa arguing with a man in a dark sedan the night she vanished. The police never mentioned this in their public statement. In fact, they never mentioned any witnesses at all. Emily tried tracking the IP from the post but hit a dead end. It had been wiped clean. Still, she copied the post and saved it, adding it to a growing folder on her desktop titled TLP Case. From there, she started building timelines, collecting old police reports, cross-referencing street maps with construction records. What she uncovered wasn't just a case that had gone cold. It was one that had been allowed to freeze over on purpose.
But why?
And by who? As Emily dug deeper, she started finding names that popped up again and again in old articles and court records. There was Deputy Mark Ellison, the young officer first assigned to Teresa's case who abruptly left the force less than a year later. Then there was Pastor Gregory Haynes, a prominent figure in the community at the time, who led multiple prayer vigils for Teresa and later became the spokesperson urging people to let go and move on. He was beloved in the community, seen as a pillar of moral strength. But Emily found it odd that someone so vocal during the initial investigation had never once followed up or advocated for reopening the case when new DNA tech became available. When she checked county records, she noticed something even more strange. Haynes had purchased a large parcel of land just 3 weeks after Teresa's disappearance, land that had once included the wooded path she would have taken home. A coincidence? Maybe. But it stuck with her. There were others too. Susan Bellamy, Teresa's former roommate, who had given an interview to the local newspaper claiming Teresa had seemed stressed out and talked about someone watching her. Bellamy had since moved out of state and refused interviews. Emily reached out through a Facebook message using a fake account, but the message remained unread. Another potential suspect was Martin Dean, a former cook at the diner where Teresa worked. He had a minor criminal record, nothing violent, mostly theft, and had been fired a few weeks before Teresa vanished for inappropriate behavior. The official report never mentioned Dean, and he wasn't interviewed during the initial investigation. Emily tracked him to a neighboring town where he now worked under a different name at an auto shop. When she tried to discreetly ask questions by calling the shop, she was met with hostility and a warning to drop whatever game you're playing. As the days passed, Emily found herself more entangled in the case and increasingly aware that someone didn't want her poking around. Her school laptop crashed twice in 1 week. Her bedroom window, which she always kept shut, was found slightly open one morning with mud on the sill. She dismissed it at first. Maybe she forgot to lock it. Maybe the laptop just had a virus. But when she mentioned the research to her teacher, Mr. McClellan, and asked if she could extend the project to explore the larger implications of historical police negligence, he immediately grew cold. "Stick to the assignment, Emily," he said flatly. "Don't make this personal." It was the first time she'd ever heard him sound like that. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Her gut told her there was something deeper, something twisted and ugly, buried beneath the polite exterior of her hometown. She didn't want to believe it, but every new document, every name she uncovered added another layer of doubt. Was it possible this wasn't just about a single girl going missing? Was there a larger cover-up? Could someone still be out there, watching, waiting? Her mother started noticing changes too. Emily became more withdrawn, constantly locking her door, carrying around a flash drive on a lanyard like it was a sacred object. She barely ate. When asked what was wrong, Emily would just say she had a lot of schoolwork.
But her mom knew it was more than that.
One evening, Emily came home to find the contents of her backpack spilled across the floor. Nothing had been stolen, except the flash drive was now in a different pocket. That was the moment she knew someone had been in the house. She copied everything to a cloud backup that night, just in case. But even with the fear closing in, she couldn't stop. Something inside her refused to back down. She was too close now. She could feel it. The truth was in reach, and it was bigger than anyone had imagined. But what Emily didn't know yet was that someone had been tracking her from the start. Someone who remembered the case all too well. Someone who had something to lose if she succeeded. And while the community began buzzing about this smart teen solving crime story, Emily started receiving anonymous notes in her locker. Simple messages typed in bold black font. Stop digging. You're next. This isn't your story. But Emily had already decided. If it wasn't her story before, it was now. And she wasn't about to let it go. Not when justice had waited 30 years. What she didn't realize is that the closer she got to the truth, the more she was walking directly into the mouth of the beast. Because somewhere out there, a killer was watching. And they were preparing to strike again. Just when Emily thought she was finally connecting the dots, everything started to fall apart. It began subtly at first, with small disruptions that could have been coincidences, until they started stacking up like a wall between her and the truth. One afternoon, she returned to the local library to check on a microfilm reel she had reviewed just days earlier. It was gone. Not just misplaced, but completely erased from the catalog, with no record it had ever existed. When she asked the librarian, Mrs. Colburn, about it, the woman's usual warmth turned oddly distant. You must be mistaken, dear, she said without looking Emily in the eye. That case is from before your time. Best to focus on more recent topics for your project. The tone didn't match the friendly, curious librarian Emily had known for years. Something felt off, like Mrs. Colburn was repeating a line she'd been told to say. Emily pressed, but the woman clammed up completely. It was the first time she'd ever seen fear behind the smile. That same night, Emily's cloud backup glitched. The folder containing her entire investigation, photos, scans, recordings, even her personal notes, suddenly appeared empty. She stared at the screen in disbelief, her hands trembling as she refreshed the page over and over.
Gone.
Every piece of data she had collected over the past month had vanished. She logged into the admin dashboard and found a strange IP address in the activity log, one she didn't recognize. It traced back to an out-of-state network, possibly a VPN, but she couldn't dig any further. The account had been locked out due to suspicious activity. It felt like more than just a random hack. Someone had intentionally wiped her work, right as she was closing in on the truth. Things at school weren't any better. Rumors started spreading. Whispers in the hallway. Snide comments during lunch. Emily's trying to be a YouTube detective now. One girl muttered loud enough for her to hear. She thinks she's going to be famous or something. A few kids even suggested she was faking it for views, referencing the growing attention her project was getting after the local news segment aired a teaser about her investigation. Even her closest friends started acting different. Sarah, her best friend since freshman year, stopped responding to her texts. Emily tried to confront her after class, but Sarah brushed her off. You're getting too deep, Em, she said. It's not just a school project anymore. You're playing with people's lives. Then she walked away, leaving Emily standing in the hallway, stunned. But the worst part came the next morning. A man showed up at her house. He wore a navy suit and carried a fake smile charm that set off alarms in Emily's gut before he even introduced himself. He claimed to be with the County Education Committee, doing a follow-up on student projects related to public history. He asked vague, overly friendly questions about her research methods, her sources, and what she intended to present. When she mentioned the missing girl's name, his demeanor shifted just slightly, enough for her to catch it. He nodded stiffly, said something about respecting closed matters, and handed her a business card that listed no website, no direct email, just a name, a number, and a blank address. After he left, Emily called the number. It had already been disconnected. And then came the betrayal. She had always trusted Mr. McClellan, her history teacher. He had been the first adult to encourage her curiosity, praising her research during class presentations and even suggesting she reach out to local journalists. But when she went to him for help after the library footage disappeared, he shocked her with a flat, rehearsed denial. "Emily, I think it's time you stopped," he said, lowering his voice. "You don't know what you're getting involved in. Some things are better left buried." She stared at him, realizing he knew more than he was letting on. Something in his eyes looked pained, like a man carrying a secret too heavy for one lifetime. When she pressed him, he didn't get angry, he got quiet. "People got hurt back then," he whispered. "And they'll get hurt again if you keep pushing." It felt like a warning, but also regret. She left his classroom that day with more questions than answers. Why was he protecting a case that had supposedly been closed 3 decades ago? What did he know about Teresa Lynn Porter's disappearance? And why was everyone acting like her curiosity was dangerous? Her questions only grew when she discovered a strange set of coded journal entries in the school archives, part of a former student's forgotten donation to the school's yearbook committee. The author had gone to the same high school as Teresa and hinted at a secret meeting spot deep in the woods near a rusted-out train car. The entries didn't mention names, but they referenced late-night gatherings, threats, and something called the Pact. Emily had never heard of it before. Was it a secret club? A cult? A blackmail ring? Whatever it was, the entries stopped suddenly after a chilling final line. She knew too much. If she talks, we all burn. That final page was ripped out. Emily now found herself standing at the edge of something darker than she ever imagined, an underground secret that had remained buried for decades, protected by people who were still very much alive and willing to do anything to keep it that way. And as she traced the journal's cryptic clues to the woods behind the old paper mill, she realized someone was following her. Not just paranoia. Real footsteps, snapping twigs, the kind of presence you feel in your spine before you hear it in your ears. She turned to look, but no one was there. Yet on the ground near the rusted train car, she found something half buried in the dirt, something that didn't belong in the present. A necklace, caked in mud, tarnished but unmistakable. It matched the one Teresa wore in that old newspaper photo. As Emily reached down to pick it up, her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. A blocked number. No caller ID. She answered, her voice shaking. And a distorted voice said one thing before the line cut out. "You were never supposed to find this." Now, with more people turning against her, her evidence mysteriously erased, and her own safety uncertain, Emily must decide whether to walk away or risk everything to uncover a truth someone has killed to protect. But what she doesn't know yet is that one person she trusts the most has been lying to her from the start. That night, Emily barely slept. The distorted voice on the phone kept replaying in her head like a broken record, every syllable scraping against her nerves. "You were never supposed to find this." The message was more than a threat, it was confirmation. Someone was watching her, monitoring her every step, maybe even closer than she realized. She tried to piece it together logically, mapping out names, timelines, and locations, but the more she analyzed, the more chaotic it became. Just when she thought she was inching toward a breakthrough, the puzzle seemed to grow more elaborate, with pieces that didn't fit no matter how hard she tried to force them. But what really shattered her sense of reality was what happened the next morning. When someone else stepped into the shadows, she thought she was navigating alone. It was Jamie, a quiet classmate from her AP government class, someone she barely spoke to outside of school projects, someone who never showed up in gossip, drama, or yearbook photos. He was the kind of student who slipped under the radar, never drawing attention to himself, the type teachers called responsible and classmates called forgettable. But that morning, Jamie showed up at her locker, visibly shaken. His eyes darted around the hallway like he was being followed, and he held a manila envelope so tightly in his hand it looked like he was trying to crush it. "Emily," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I think I found something. Or maybe it found me." She pulled him aside, heart pounding, as he handed her the envelope and explained how he'd received it just before school. No return address. Just his name written in shaky block letters. Inside were photocopied images, grainy, black and white photos from a long-forgotten yearbook page showing a group of students standing outside that same rusted train car she'd found. But that wasn't what made Emily's breath hitch. One of the students in the background, blurred but unmistakable, was Mr. McClellan. Younger, wearing the same ring he still wore in class. The photo was dated 3 weeks before Teresa went missing. Emily's hands trembled as she flipped through the rest of the envelope. Newspaper clippings, student records, and a weathered, hand-drawn map that matched the journal entries she'd found in the archive. It pointed to a second location, deeper in the woods, marked with an X and the word vault. Beneath that, someone had scrawled in red ink, "This time, dig deeper." But the creepiest part wasn't even the contents. It was the note taped to the inside flap, written in the same strange, all-caps handwriting. "Your friend isn't the only one being watched." Jamie said he had no idea who sent it or why he was dragged into it, but he had recently started helping the school media club digitize old yearbooks and film reels. He thought it was a mindless after-school task, until he noticed 2 entire reels had been scratched out with a razor blade. And on one of the digital backups, buried in corrupted data, was a single frame that flickered on screen like a ghost, a girl's face, wide-eyed and terrified, running through the trees in what looked like VHS-quality film. There were no identifying tags, no timestamp, and it lasted less than a second, but Emily recognized the face instantly. It was Teresa. That moment shattered what little sense of safety Emily had left. If that footage existed, then someone had filmed Teresa before she disappeared. That meant her vanishing wasn't a random runaway or unfortunate accident. It was something calculated.
Filmed.
Possibly premeditated. And someone went through a lot of trouble to erase the evidence and bury the trail. Which now begged the question, why was Jamie being targeted too? Had someone seen him snooping around? Or was he already part of it in ways he didn't realize? As Emily tried to process it all, she started to re-examine everything. Every person she'd spoken to, every document she'd seen, every interaction she'd brushed off as normal. Sarah's sudden coldness. The librarian's weird behavior. Her teacher's cryptic warning. It all seemed connected in a tangled web of secrets. But now a new thread had emerged, one that contradicted everything she thought she understood. According to the yearbook Jamie had scanned, Teresa hadn't vanished during the spring like the official police report said. A scribbled annotation in the margins, written in what looked like a different ink and handwriting, claimed she was last seen the previous fall, around Halloween, wearing a cheer uniform at a bonfire hosted by the school's football team. That detail had never been mentioned anywhere in the official files. Even more disturbing, Emily found a blurry Polaroid tucked into one of the old yearbooks from that same year, showing the bonfire, exactly as described. And in the corner, almost hidden in the shadows, was a person wearing a grotesque homemade mask, standing slightly apart from the rest. The figure's presence felt wrong, as though they didn't belong in the scene but had been watching from the fringes, unnoticed. Emily had the sinking realization that this wasn't a mystery about a missing girl anymore. It was about a hidden culture at the heart of the town, something sinister that had survived beneath the surface for decades, passing from generation to generation, its secrets encoded in smiles, fake alibis, and yearbook signatures. And now Emily wasn't the only one unraveling the threads. With Jamie tangled in the same nightmare, it was no longer just her voice pushing against the silence. It was 2 of them, and the people who wanted them quiet were likely growing more desperate. But just when it seemed like they might be making real progress, Jamie stopped responding. No texts. No DMs. No sign of him at school the next day. His mom called the front office, thinking he was sick, but no one had heard from him since the night before. His backpack was found behind the school auditorium. His phone was smashed, completely shattered, like someone had stomped on it. And when Emily tried to call his number, it went straight to voicemail, followed by a brief static hum and then silence. Then, she received a photo on her burner account. It was a screenshot of her standing outside the rusted train car, holding the necklace she found. Taken from the woods, from a distance, from someone watching her. And underneath the photo was a new message. You're not solving this. You're repeating it. Now, everything Emily thought she knew has been flipped upside down. And as the ground beneath her starts to crack, she's forced to ask herself a chilling question. What if Teresa wasn't the only one who disappeared? And what if the next one is already chosen? Emily had never felt truly alone until that night. The town looked different after sunset. Not just darker, but older, like the streets had memories they refused to forget. She walked faster down the sidewalk, her backpack hugging tightly to her shoulders, her breath sharp in the chilled night air. Every street lamp cast long shadows that seemed to stretch toward her like fingers, and every sudden rustle made her heart pound louder. Jamie's disappearance had flipped something inside her, not just a fear for him, but a realization that whatever she was caught in, it was real, and it was watching her. She kept thinking back to the photo someone had sent her, the one of her holding the necklace in the woods, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the person who took it might be only a few steps behind her now. Her mind spiraled through everything she'd seen, the journal, the photo, the masked figure, the corrupted video, and no matter how she tried to piece it together, there was always something missing.
A gap.
A silence. A face just out of frame. But what chilled her even more was the growing certainty that it wasn't just about solving a cold case. It was about disrupting something buried and dangerous, a secret so deeply ingrained that the people keeping it would rather destroy anyone who came close than let it be exposed. She didn't know who to trust anymore. Everyone she'd once viewed as background noise in her life suddenly became potential threats. Teachers, neighbors, even her own friends. She started to wonder if Jamie had been bait. Or worse, collateral. The final crack in her sense of safety came the following morning when she returned home from school to find her front door slightly open. Her mom's car was still in the driveway. Lights were on inside. But something was off. The way the door hung ajar like it had been gently pushed, not slammed. Emily's stomach twisted. She pushed it open slowly, calling out, "Mom?" Her voice echoed hollowly through the foyer. No answer. Her eyes darted from the living room to the kitchen. Everything looked undisturbed, but it was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that presses on your ears and tells you something is wrong even before you know why. She stepped inside, every movement tight and cautious, her hands shaking as she gripped her phone. She tiptoed up the stairs to her mom's bedroom. Empty. Bathroom, empty. She was about to turn around when she noticed it. Her mom's purse, still sitting on the kitchen counter.
Keys. Phone.
Wallet. All untouched. That's when the panic hit. Her mom never went anywhere without her purse. Never left without telling her. Emily's hands started to sweat as she dialed her mom's number.
Ring. Ring.
Then voicemail. Again. Again.
Still nothing.
She texted. No reply. She tried her stepdad, who worked 2 towns over. He hadn't seen her either. He told her to check the neighbor's house.
She did.
Nothing. By dusk, her mom was officially missing. And that's when the email came in. The subject line was blank. No sender name. Just an attachment, a photo. Her mom. Blindfolded. Sitting in what looked like an old wooden chair. Her mouth taped shut. Hands bound. A dark room. Barely visible behind her. And scrawled across her shirt in black marker were 3 words, "Stop or she disappears too." Emily couldn't breathe. Her chest felt like it was caving in. This wasn't a mystery anymore, it was a countdown. Someone was playing with her, turning her investigation into a sick game. Her mom had nothing to do with this, but they had taken her anyway. To send a message. To make it clear that Emily wasn't the one in control. She paced in circles, shaking, crying, trying to make sense of it. Who would do this? How did they get into her house? How did they know she'd gone to that train car? Who had been following her? Every time she thought she was 1 step ahead, someone was already 2 steps beyond, pulling the strings. She couldn't go to the police. Not anymore. They'd already written Teresa off as a runaway. They wouldn't believe her now, especially not with how deep the conspiracy might run. What if the officer who took her report had ties to whoever was behind this? What if the very system she needed to rely on was already compromised? She felt the walls closing in. She didn't know who to trust. Her friends stopped answering. Her teachers avoided eye contact. She saw the school principal whispering to the guidance counselor as she passed them in the hallway, and both of them turned away too quickly. Emily's world had become a maze of mirrored lies, and the deeper she walked into it, the less sure she was that she'd make it out the other side. And then something strange happened. Her burner account, the one only Jamie and she knew about, received a direct message from a new user. No profile photo. No name. Just a username. Passenger Echo 13. The message read, "You're not crazy. She wasn't the first, but you might be the last." Attached was a blurry image of what looked like an old police badge. The story Emily thought she was writing had taken a turn she couldn't have imagined. She wasn't just following breadcrumbs to a decades-old crime. She was living the next chapter of it. And the ending? Someone else might have already written it. The message haunted her. You're not crazy. She wasn't the first, but you might be the last. That single line echoed in Emily's mind long after her screen went dark. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. And with every hour that passed without a sign from her mother, her hands trembled more, her breath felt shallower, and the world around her became more surreal, like she was stuck in some kind of waking nightmare with no escape. The town felt colder. Everyone looked different. What once felt like home now pulsed with suspicion, as if the air itself carried secrets and lies. Every familiar face came with a question. What do they know that I don't? She sat in her room surrounded by her project files, scattered photos, maps, and printed documents from obscure court records and missing persons bulletins she'd collected. The train yard, the necklace, the journal entries, the photo of her mom. Passenger Echo 13. It all connected somehow, but the missing link still hovered like a ghost in the shadows. That's when her phone buzzed again, this time a number she recognized. Mrs. Layton. Her old social studies teacher. Emily froze. She hadn't spoken to her since she switched schools after freshman year, and she certainly hadn't told her anything about the project or what was happening. The message was brief. I need to see you. Urgent. Meet at old cafeteria entrance. Alone. Her heart sank. Why now? Why her? Why would Mrs. Layton, of all people, reach out in the middle of everything? The cafeteria entrance was on the abandoned side of the school, used only during lockdown drills or maintenance work. It was tucked out of sight, no windows, no foot traffic. A perfect place to hide. Or ambush. She stared at the message for almost 10 minutes before making up her mind. If she wanted answers, she had to take risks. She slipped a small pocket knife into her coat, told her stepdad she was going to the library, and left just after dusk. The wind bit at her face as she walked, and every sound behind her made her flinch. By the time she reached the door, her nerves were frayed. Mrs. Layton was already there. Older, wearier, her posture stiff and her eyes darting from corner to corner like she was being hunted too. She didn't greet Emily.
Didn't waste time.
Just opened with, "What you found." It wasn't just a cold case. It was covered up for a reason. The conversation that followed was more than Emily could take in all at once. Mrs. Layton confessed that years ago, she'd been a student teacher working in the same district when Teresa went missing. She remembered the police quietly interviewing faculty, collecting security footage, and then just stopping. Everything disappeared overnight. Records, incident reports, even a few witnesses transferred out or left town. Layton hadn't questioned it at the time, chalking it up to bureaucracy. But when Emily's name started popping up in certain circles, people asking about her, watching her, Mrs. Layton felt the old unease return. She told Emily she wasn't safe, that some people in town had more to lose than anyone realized. And then she looked her dead in the eye and said, "If you love your mother, stop. Walk away. Don't play hero. They won't let you win." But Emily wouldn't. That night, she sat on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, and cried like she hadn't in years. Because she realized what Mrs. Layton had done, offered her a way out. A choice. Walk away and maybe see her mom again. Or keep digging and risk losing everything. It was a cruel kind of ultimatum. One that tore her apart. Because deep down, Part of her wanted to burn it all down and make them pay. But the other part, the scared, lonely part, just wanted her mom to come home. As if the universe had been listening, another message appeared. Passenger Echo, 13 again. This time, a video. A shaky, low-light clip of a man pacing nervously in a garage, holding what looked like the same necklace Emily had found. His face was blurry, but she recognized the voice. It was her stepdad. She dropped the phone. The air left her lungs. The man who'd raised her since she was 8, the one who always left a post-it note on the fridge before work, who taught her to drive, who helped her build the model of the train yard for her project, was part of this? She replayed it, eyes wide with disbelief, catching bits of muffled conversation as he said things like, "They're getting close," and "She's asking questions she shouldn't." Emily sat frozen. Was he working with them? Was her mother even missing? Or was it all some elaborate lie? But the most terrifying thing was what came at the very end of the clip, his eyes locking with the camera like he knew someone was watching. And then, softly, "I warned you not to look." The truth was no longer about justice. It was about survival. And Emily was running out of time. Emily's world was no longer just unraveling. It was collapsing, fast and loud and impossible to stop. The video of her stepfather was the match, and everything she thought she knew about her life ignited in a blaze of betrayal. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking, not even after the 4th replay. Each time, the weight of it crushed her more, his voice, his eyes, the quiet threat wrapped in that one line. "I warned you not to look." But that was the thing. He never had warned her. Not once. He encouraged the project, gave her research tips, helped build the miniature train yard she used to win the district prize. Was it all part of a trap? Had he been guiding her just far enough until she saw too much? She didn't sleep that night. She stayed up cross-referencing timelines, emails, scanned documents, every memory she could dig out of her exhausted brain. That's when she noticed something odd in the project files. An older article about a 1986 rail accident listed a name that looked familiar. One of the first responders who disappeared after the initial investigation was named Officer Dale Whitmore. Her heart thudded in her chest. That name was in her stepdad's phone. She'd seen it just 2 weeks ago when he handed it to her to find a takeout number. He said it was a guy from work. But Officer Dale Whitmore had been declared missing over 3 decades ago. So how was his number active? She went to the local library to dig deeper, using the town's physical archives, stacks of yellowed newspapers, fading records, and microfilm. In one of the oldest boxes, tucked between coverage of a local mayoral race and a minor train derailment, she found it, a photo of Officer Whitmore, and standing behind him, blurry but unmistakable, was her stepdad. His face hadn't aged much. His name wasn't in the article. He wasn't identified. He shouldn't have been there. But there he was. Emily felt her stomach twist. That photo was taken in 1986, 4 years before she was born.
None of it made sense.
Unless he wasn't who he claimed to be at all. That night, she confronted him. She didn't mean to. She told herself she'd wait for proof, but she couldn't hold it in. Her voice cracked as she showed him the photo and asked who he really was. He didn't answer at first, just stared at it. Then, without a word, he walked out of the room and locked himself in the basement. She didn't sleep again. By morning, his truck was gone. So was his phone. So were the hard drives from the home office. In their place was a note, 5 words, scratched hastily in pen on a receipt. "Don't follow. It's not safe." Emily felt the walls closing in. If he had run, what was he running from? Or, more terrifying, what was he protecting her from? She went back to the school. To Mrs. Layton. But when she got there, she found police tape and officers swarming the building. A sign posted on the door said the area was closed due to gas leak investigations. Emily tried to get close, but one of the officers stopped her. When she asked about Mrs. Layton, he told her there was no teacher on record by that name. That no one matching her description had ever worked there. That the records showed the old cafeteria wing hadn't been used in over 10 years. Emily backed away, heart racing. She pulled up her texts. The message from Mrs. Layton was gone. Not deleted, gone. Like it had never existed. She checked the video from her stepdad. Corrupted. Unplayable. She opened the file folder for her train yard project. Half the files wouldn't open. Her mother's last voicemail? Static. That's when she knew this wasn't just about her. Someone, somewhere, was wiping everything. Not just to protect secrets, but to erase them. Erase her. She wasn't the first student to stumble across something buried. But she might be the last one still breathing. Emily raced home to back up what little she had left, but as she stepped through the door, she saw it. The front room ransacked, drawers overturned, photos missing from the wall. Her laptop was gone. So was her mother's box of keepsakes. But one thing remained, laid carefully on the kitchen counter. Her necklace. The one her mother gave her the night before she disappeared. The clasp was broken, and someone had scratched something into the metal. It was a date.
And a time.
Tonight. Midnight. Back at the train yard. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Whoever took everything wasn't trying to end it. They wanted her to come. Wanted her to see. And despite the fear, the overwhelming dread crawling up her spine, she knew she would go. Because whatever this was, this conspiracy, this web of lies and erasure, it had taken her mother. It had taken her stepdad, or whatever he truly was. It had taken her safety, her peace of mind, her belief in right and wrong. But it hadn't taken her resolve. Not yet. And at midnight, she'd finally find out why. The abandoned train yard hadn't changed much since the day Emily filmed her project there. It was still hollow, half swallowed by the dark, surrounded by rusted rails and forgotten echoes of a time long past. But something about it felt different now. Heavier. Every gust of wind seemed to whisper something unfinished. Her sneakers crunched over gravel as she moved toward the coordinates scratched into her necklace. Midnight was just 2 minutes away. Her heart was hammering loud enough to drown out every other sound, her breath shallow, eyes darting toward every shadow that seemed to twitch. She had no phone, no backup, no one to call if this went sideways. Just the worn metal pendant pressed tight in her palm and the knowledge that this was the only way forward. She wasn't just chasing the truth anymore. She was standing on the edge of it. The central warehouse loomed in front of her, its rusting steel frame still bent from an old explosion no one had ever explained. The massive doors were partially open, as if inviting her in or warning her back. As she stepped inside, her flashlight beam flickered over old train cars, some stripped down to their bones, others covered in tarps, so stained they looked like burial shrouds. And then she heard it footsteps. Not hurried, but deliberate. Someone else was here. A voice echoed across the cavernous space.
Come.
Familiar. You were always going to come here, Emily. Her breath hitched. She turned, the flashlight trembling in her grip, and there he was, her stepfather. Not in the flannel shirts he always wore, but in a dark jacket she didn't recognize. His expression was unreadable, and for the first time in her life, she couldn't tell what he was thinking. His eyes flicked to the necklace in her hand. You figured it out, he said. Not everything, she replied, her voice tighter than she expected. You need to tell me the truth. All of it. Now.
He sighed.
I didn't want this for you. That project of yours. When I saw what you'd uncovered, I realized it was happening again. Just like before. They were watching even then. She stepped closer, heart pounding. Who's they? He looked past her, as if expecting someone to be listening. It started in 1986. The derailment was no accident. That train was carrying experimental tech, government stuff. Something they didn't want the public to know about. Radiation levels were off the charts. But someone got greedy. They tried to steal it, smuggle pieces out before the cleanup team arrived. Whitmore was one of them. And I was supposed to keep it buried. Witnesses vanished. Stories were rewritten. Anyone who asked too many questions disappeared. Her hands were shaking again. So, you were one of them. I was one of the few who turned, who walked away. But you started digging, and when your story went to the news, it triggered alarms in places you can't even imagine. I tried to pull you back, but it was already in motion. She stared at him, ball rising in her throat. Why not just tell me the truth? He looked genuinely pained. Because the truth is poison, Emily. The people you think are protecting you, they'll erase you, just like your mother. Emily's breath caught. My mother, what happened to her? He nodded toward a tarp-covered train car. She came back here. She found something she wasn't supposed to. Left a message for you. I couldn't stop her. With trembling hands, Emily stepped toward the car and pulled back the tarp. Inside was a dusty black box, about the size of a suitcase, marked with old government insignias. Taped to the lid was a photo of her mother, alive, older than Emily remembered, holding a handwritten note. They lied to you. The truth is in the data core. Don't trust him. Emily froze. What is this? Her stepfather didn't answer. She turned. His gun was already drawn. I'm sorry, he said, voice cracking. They're listening. If they think I let you leave with this, they'll kill us both. She stepped back, tears stinging her eyes. Then don't let them think it. Help me. His hand trembled. His jaw clenched. For a second, she saw the war behind his eyes, the man who had raised her battling the one who had been built for silence and control. And then, the lights exploded in a shower of sparks. Darkness swallowed everything. Screams rang out, not his, and the sound of boots slammed against the concrete. Flashlights bobbed. Red dots swept through the dark. And then came a voice through a bullhorn, harsh, cold, and unfamiliar. Step away from the container. Emily Carter, come with us now. She ducked behind the train car as shots rang out, not aimed to kill, but to scatter. Her stepfather shouted something she couldn't hear over the chaos. When she looked again, he was gone. The container was gone. And all that remained was the photo, her mother's face, half torn, staring back through the smoke. In that moment, Emily knew this wasn't over. It never had been. They hadn't come to destroy the truth. They came to own it. And she was now the only one left who knew where it started, or how far it might go. Weeks passed before Emily finally returned to her apartment, the once familiar space now feeling more like a faded photograph than a refuge. The headlines had long moved on, new viral stories, trending TikTok drama, and another political scandal that drowned out anything deeper. No one reported what happened at the train yard. No one spoke of the men in black gear or the unmarked vans that vanished into the night. The world had moved forward like nothing had happened, just as it always did. But Emily knew better. She knew what was stolen from that warehouse, what nearly got buried again. She had the photo still, the torn edges now framed beside a stack of hard drives salvaged from a motel in Indiana, drives sent anonymously, containing encrypted files that took weeks to crack. Inside were blueprints, audio logs, and surveillance files connecting Whitmore, the tech company she'd exposed in her documentary, and a now-defunct government division that hadn't officially existed since 1991. Her mother's voice, buried in the files, described experiments, cover-ups, and whistleblowers who vanished without a trace. But it wasn't just about conspiracy. It was about control, about rewriting public memory through data manipulation and media suppression. And her story had been the key that reopened the door. She released the files piece by piece through a secure channel, disguised as leaks from Project Echo. Within days, Reddit threads exploded, TikTok sleuths began decoding GPS metadata, and YouTube creators started analyzing every soundbite for clues. People were hungry for truth, especially when it tasted forbidden. But Emily didn't attach her name to any of it. She stayed in the shadows, watching the story grow legs of its own. Because she knew the spotlight could burn you alive. She'd seen what happened to those who got too close. Still, a part of her longed for justice, for the world to finally connect the dots and realize how far the lies went. But the deeper ache was for closure, for answers about her mother, her stepfather, and whether either of them had truly chosen her over silence, or if she'd been just another variable in someone else's calculation. On the one-year anniversary of her original documentary upload, a mysterious live stream appeared on multiple platforms without warning. It showed grainy security footage from inside a government facility, the same one mentioned in her mother's files. In it, a woman resembling her mother walked down a corridor with two men in lab coats, her expression unreadable. The footage ended abruptly, but the final frame lingered. Her mother turned slightly toward the camera, mouthing something. Users slowed it down, enhanced the image, obsessed over the lip movements. The consensus eventually settled on 3 words: "I'm still here." Emily watched it 100 times, heart pounding, tears hot behind her eyes. There was no confirmation the video was real. It could have been AI generated, a deepfake, or part of a PSYOP campaign to discredit the leaks. But in her gut, she knew this wasn't over. Her mother hadn't been lost. She'd been hidden. Or worse, forced into silence. So Emily made a choice. She packed her things, disconnected her phone, and left the apartment without saying goodbye. No social media update. No goodbye post. No GPS trail. She disappeared into the same fog of uncertainty that once swallowed her mother. Because some truths aren't meant to be shouted from rooftops, they're meant to be followed, step by shadowy step. And somewhere out there, beneath the noise of viral videos and trending hashtags, a deeper story still simmered. People were watching now. People were asking questions. And the next time the door creaked open, Emily would be ready. The truth had taken everything from her, but it had also given her something else: purpose. And for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid of the dark. She was part of it, waiting, watching, listening for the next signal.